Eight spinners in a circus.
Well, they've got so much. I mean, on one level, it's the biggest decision since since a month ago when they made the decision to lock us down, right? But the way, so you could say it's the biggest decision since not long ago. But the level of these decisions that have been made this year are obviously at the extreme end of any government decision making, and so this is part of the new normal, is that we're now accepting as kind of like daily news kind of decisions that would be the biggest story of 2 or 3 year period of a political term, and they're coming thick and fast. So, yeah, it's a huge decision. But they've obviously had to balance up the political ability of willingness of people to buy into this project to keep ourselves safe versus, with the public health and everything else they're trying to consider.
Yeah, and you say that there's no right and wrong decision here too. Whatever way, lives and livelihoods will be lost. An extraordinary time for decision-making around that table. Yeah,
and this is the thing. People, there is a binary argument because ultimately the decision today has been a binary one. We're going to level 3 at such and such a date. That is a one thing or the other. But the decision-making process can't be that binary. There are all these plates in the air. It's not economy or public health because these things are all so tied together. Compliance fatigue is in there somewhere. The logistics of how these things work is in there. The enforcement issues are all in there. These are not just simple binary decisions. They're weighing up a whole bunch of different issues. And part of that, a big part of that, is whether people will actually, behave and buy into this. And that's why you can see, I'm sure, this is pushed out beyond Anzac weekend because I'm sure the political confidence is not there that people would actually behave Anzac weekend. And so they're covering their bets that way.
Politically, Ben Thomas raised a point about the communication of it, and his view has it's been quite masterful. And I know that Tony Blair's chief strategist, Alistair Campbell, made the same point a couple of weeks ago. What do you make of the political communication, how this has been rolled out?
Oh, look, I think, the everyday, the steady manner has been very reassuring, the language used. Look, we know that the Prime Minister this is one of her strengths. We've discovered there's this guy called Ashley Bloomfield who also has the strength. I think there are still questions to be asked, and I think we're looking at how the PPE is being used and not used in some places. There are still hard questions that need to be asked, and will be asked, I think, over the next few weeks. But to be fair, let's give credit to the people. The opposition has played a very nuanced and clever role in this. The media has, I think, reported it well without getting too hysterical one way, but still asked hard questions where they can, although I'm sure there are harder questions to come when the time is right. I think all around, this has shown that New Zealand is actually a pretty well-run country, whoever happens to be in charge at the time. We are very lucky.
All right, Tim Watkin from Pundit, thank you very, very much there. What about you, Laura? How do you think... I'm sure that this will be studied in 20 years' time in classrooms around the world, how decisions were made in this time.
Yeah, I think the government I think Jacinda's doing a great job. I agree that she's a masterful communicator. I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is how we ensure that everyone has enough income to continue to live with dignity during and beyond COVID-19, because there's been made the point that it's more difficult, all the other problems are more difficult if you don't have enough money. Yeah. And so I would love to be exploring a basic
Ben,
for
Laura,
New Zealand.
Thank you for your time.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, 11:59 p.m. Monday, April 27th. A week from now, New Zealand will move to level 3. The Prime Minister says New Zealanders have made a quantum leap forward in eliminating COVID-19, and our team of 5 million has broken the chain of transmission. We'll stay at alert level 3 for 2 weeks before the government reviews the decision. That means takeaways are on the menu for Mother's Day. Fears that people aren't seeking normal medical treatment after 2 patients turn up at Hawke's Bay Hospital 3 days after having heart attacks. A man brandishing a machete is shot dead by police in South Auckland, and at least 16 people are dead after a gunman goes on a rampage in Canada.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. I'm Paul Brennan. Good afternoon. The Level 4 lockdown, which was initially set for 4 weeks until midnight on Wednesday, is being extended to end at 1 minute to midnight next Monday. The Prime Minister says the country will then go into Level 3 for 2 weeks, and a decision will then be made on the next move. Announcing the decision an hour ago after today's Cabinet meeting, Jacinda Ardern told New Zealanders the gains made at Level 4 must not be lost.
You have sacrificed too much for us to lose those gains now. Let's lock them in. Make sure we do everything we can not to go backwards and keep moving forward successfully.
Jacinda Ardern says only 2 more business days will be lost compared with existing Level 4 on Thursday morning, and in the meantime businesses can enter their premises to stock. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health has confirmed 9 new cases of COVID-19, 7 confirmed and 2 probable. That brings the total number of cases reported since the outbreak began to 1,440, 974 of whom have recovered. There are 14 people in hospital, 3 of them are in intensive care and 2 in a critical condition. The government is putting an extra $55 million into upgrading its system for tracing contacts of people who catch COVID-19. The Prime Minister says that will include boosting the number of tracing staff from 220 to 300. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says an independent audit of the system found some small gaps and made recommendations that the Health Ministry is implementing. He says as of now, up to 5,000 contacts can be traced each day, and the aim is to increase that number. The Capital and Coast District Health Board says all staff contacts of a Wellington hospital nurse with COVID-19 have tested negative. 79 staff who had been in contact were swabbed, and the nurse's community contacts are being traced. The DHB spokesperson Joy Farley says it's investigating how the infection happened. The Broadcasting Minister, Chris Farfoy, says the government has no immediate plans to make Facebook and Google pay for news content generated by media companies. Australia's competition watchdog has been instructed to develop a mandatory code of conduct that includes paying for news content and being penalised for non-compliance. But Mr Farfoy says he has not asked the Commerce Commission to develop a similar code. He says commercial relationships between international digital platforms and the news media form part of a wider discussion about how the government can help the industry. The number of people killed by a man on a murderous rampage in eastern Canada has risen to 16 and may go higher. The BBC's Matt Graveling reports.
The attack in Nova Scotia lasted for 12 hours. It began on Saturday night, with police alerted to an incident involving firearms in the rural town of Portapique. Police said the suspect was driving what appeared to be a police car before changing to another vehicle. Police later informed people that the 12-hour rampage ended in a car chase on Sunday and that the attacker is also dead. The gunman shot people in several locations across Nova Scotia, which means authorities are still trying to establish the final death toll.
Matt Graveling with that report. A man living near the scene of a fatal police shooting in Auckland overnight heard a man screaming and swearing before an officer shot him dead. The police say the man, who had a machete, smashed windows in a family's house and damaged other property. He advanced on the officer with the machete and died at the scene after being shot. Raghubir Reha was woken by loud voices.
I heard that they were arguing between each other, and then in the meantime, within 2 minutes, there were 2 shots. Tuk, tuk.
2 police investigations into the shooting are underway. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. In sport this afternoon, the Black Caps wicketkeeper BJ Watling has had his contract with English countryside Lancashire terminated in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. He had been due to play 9 matches for the club, which has retained the option of signing him for the 2021 season. Fellow Black Cap Matt Henry's contract with Kent was cancelled earlier this month. All English domestic fixtures have been cancelled until at least May the 28th. And world tennis number 1, Novak Djokovic, faces a dilemma if it becomes compulsory for top players to get vaccinated against the coronavirus before they can start competing again. In a live Facebook chat, Djokovic said he was opposed to vaccination and wouldn't want to be forced by someone to take a vaccine in order to be able to travel. Medical experts say vaccines against COVID-19 won't be ready until next year, raising doubts whether any further tennis tournaments can be held this year. And that's the news.
This is a COVID-19 official government announcement. We remain at alert level 4. Continue to stay home. This is still saving lives and breaking the chain of transmission. When exercising, stay in your bubble, stay local and stay safe. Non-essential workplaces must remain closed. Please do not travel to your business to prepare for any possible change in alert level. Police will enforce the requirements to only travel for the right reasons. Go to covid19.govt.nz for more information.
Now the short forecast taking us through to midnight tomorrow Tuesday from Met Service. Northland, scattered rain easing to isolated showers about now. Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, mainly fine. High cloud today, areas of low cloud in the morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa fine with high cloud. Waitomo to Wellington, including central high country, cloudy periods, isolated showers for the rest of today, fine tomorrow. Nelson, Buller, Westland, Fiordland and Stewart Island, scattered showers clearing north of the glaciers this evening, rain developing in Fiordland tomorrow afternoon and in South Westland tomorrow evening. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud but light rain possible in South Canterbury tomorrow evening. Otago and Southland, apart from Stewart Island, high cloud with a few coastal showers this afternoon and evening. Scattered rain developing late tomorrow afternoon or evening at the Chatham Islands. Cloudy periods, showers tonight with the odd shower tomorrow. It's 6 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. One more week to go. New Zealand will move to Alert Level 3 at midnight next Monday, April 27, where we will stay until at least May 11th. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made the announcement less than an hour ago. She said whilst shifting levels would not change much socially, it would be a vital boost for businesses after the Anzac Day holiday, when she expected at least 400,000 more people to return to work. The Prime Minister said given our country's low number of deaths, she was one of the few world leaders to receive a phone call every time someone passed away with COVID-19. She said she was proud New Zealand's team of 5 million had made a quantum leap forward in eliminating the virus.
Our transmission rate, that is the number of cases that each person with the virus passes it on to, is now 0.48, less than half a person each. Overseas, the average is 2.5 people. We have amongst the lowest number of confirmed cases per 100,000 people in the world. We have a relatively low proportion of serious cases, and according to the Oxford University Coronavirus Government Response Tracker, one of the lowest mortality rates in the world. Nearly every case identified since April 1 is primarily as a result of overseas travel or contact with someone with the virus, and often in existing clusters. The number of individual cases that we don't have an obvious connection in that period now stands at only 8. Our testing has scaled up, and we've now tested over 85,000 New Zealanders, one of the highest testing rates per capita in the world. In the last few days, we expanded testing to include random testing in Queenstown, the Waikato, Canterbury and Auckland. We've tested over 1,000 people this way and so far have produced not a single positive result. The Director General of Health is confident that there is currently no widespread undetected community transmission in New Zealand. In short, the effort of our team of 5 million has broken the chain of transmission and taken a quantum leap forward in our goal to eliminate the virus.
The Prime Minister said 2 more business days in lockdown gave New Zealand a better chance of beating the virus and not regressing to level 4. She said businesses would be permitted to prepare to open next week as long as staff practiced social distancing. And while schools and early childhood centres can reopen from Wednesday, April 29th, Jacinda Ardern stressed most people and children should still stay home.
Here is a reminder of the principles for level 3 when we get there. 1, stay home. If you are not at work, school, exercising or getting essentials, then you must be at home, the same as Alert Level 4. 2, work and learn from home if you can. We still want the vast majority of people working from home and children and young people learning from home. At-risk students and staff should also stay at home and they will be supported to do so. Early learning centres and schools will physically be open for up to Year 10 families that need them. 3, make your business COVID-19 safe. COVID-19 has spread in workplaces, so the quid pro quo of being able to open is doing it in a way that doesn't spread the virus. Important industries like construction, manufacturing, forestry will be open, as will retail, as long as it is contactless. 4, stay regional. You can exercise at parks or beaches within your region, but the closer to home, the better. Activities must be safe. Keep 2 metres away from anyone not in your bubble and make minimal trips. 5, keep your bubble as small as possible. If you need to, at level 3, you can expand your bubble a small amount to bring in close family, isolated people or caregivers. 6, wash your hands often with soap, then dry them, cough and sneeze into your elbow. And 7, and this is a really important one, if you're sick, stay at home, get advice from the GP or Healthline about getting a test, and quickly. I cannot emphasise this enough. All of our success in contact tracing and isolation relies on knowing as soon as we can when you are unwell. There is no stigma to COVID-19. We will only be successful if everyone is willing to play their part in finding it wherever it is. These rules will be so important. We all want to continue to progress down the levels. The best hope of getting back to normal as soon as possible is never getting ahead of where we are right now.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and the Government Minister Grant Robertson will join us live after 5:30. So if you have a question for him, get them in now. You can text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. That is any questions you have for the government spokesperson today, who is Grant Robertson. Now, joining us now from our gallery studio is our political editor, Jane Patterson. Jane, the lockdown extended by 2 business days and a week roughly. Did Cabinet really have a choice here?
Well, they obviously had a range of choices, but I think they've chosen to probably split the difference. We heard public health officials, experts this morning saying that probably 2 weeks, and they also judge it, or they assess it on 2 weeks and then 4 weeks in terms of the infection of the virus. So they were the blocks that they were looking at. But look, they've extended out for a week, and that is 2 business days, as you've said, Lisa, but really often many businesses don't actually operate within traditional business days, for example, hospitality. But I imagine this will be welcome news because it means that they can actually start to prepare, so businesses can start going into their premises, getting stock ready, and actually customers can start ordering as well, so that the businesses will be able to see that business coming in. But of course, with this economic activity comes greater risk, and the Prime Minister was saying, and you've just heard her read out some of the key messages, that they really are relying on New Zealanders to still stick to those rules, because apart from a few things around the edges, really life is going to look pretty much the same for a couple of weeks under level 3 for individuals and households. The big difference is getting those people and those businesses back to work. And it's not just the ones that people might have direct contact with, so retail, hospitality, but you heard the Prime Minister there talking about construction, manufacturing. Tradespeople are going to be able to pick up tools and get back to work at people's houses or on construction sites as long as they stick to those rules. So that is going to be where the big difference has made, and obviously the government thought it was just too much of a stretch to push that out another week or further for the businesses.
Yeah, in saying that, you mentioned the modelling and other professionals have said we should have waited for 2 weeks, so why not go harder for just a little bit longer to make sure we don't have to go backwards? Did they think perhaps that the public simply doesn't have the stomach for that?
I think there would have been 2 main aspects. There would have been the economic impact, because for some of these businesses, every day, every week is crucial, and just the sooner they get back, not only for the health of the businesses themselves, but of course for the general New Zealand economy. It gets revenue coming back in, it gets things moving again, but also absolutely public attitudes. And Ms Ardern said that when they looked at people's compliance and how they sort of felt about the lockdown or saw it, they relied on Google data to see how compliant people have been, and they showed a really, really good picture. But you can only push that so far, and I think you were getting to a tipping point potentially when people were seeing that the cases were low in New Zealand, that we had a very low mortality rate compared to other countries. The question was, why are we still doing this? this. So people accepted the need to do it. But having seen the success, I think it would have been trying people's patience if they pushed it out too much further. And of course, that's when you get into the situation where people are actually breaking the rules. So I imagine the call was that you're better to take a staged reduction in restrictions where people each time have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more able to do things that they want, but still sticking towards the rules. The last thing, of course, that the government would want was a public mutiny or resentment building about the lockdown restrictions. So those, I imagine, would have been the two elements weighed against actually the very positive public health data that the Cabinet was presented with today as well.
In terms of that data, though, the Prime Minister has clearly stated that there were 4 main planks that she was going to look at when Cabinet was making this decision. And one of them was contact tracing. And I heard you asking about this in the press conference because the Director-General of Health clearly stated yesterday that we are not yet at the gold standard for contact tracing. So how can we come out of level 4 if even he says we're not where we need to be?
So the report from Dr. Aisha Verrill has just been released. We haven't had a chance to have a very good look at it. We do have a statement from the Health Minister, David Clark, saying that Cabinet today agreed to $55 million to boost contact tracing. That report has obviously come back, identifying weaknesses in the system, that it needs resourcing up. But I don't think Cabinet would have gone ahead with this decision if that report had been damning about the country's ability to build that resource in time. So level 4, Dr. Bloomfield had talked about contact tracing had become easier because people's bubbles were so much smaller. They just weren't out and about and being in direct contact with other people. I imagine level 3 will be relatively the same because people's bubbles are still quite tight. It'll be level 2, level 1 from onwards that they'll really need to see that contact tracing really up to speed to that gold standard that Dr. Bloomfield talks about. That report must have given them the confidence that the government, that the country can get to that point, but they've had to put a big wodge of money, $55 million, to make that happen.
Thanks, Jane. That's our political editor, Jane Patterson, and Dr. Aisha Verrill will be joining us after 6 this evening to discuss that audit she conducted on our contact tracing. So how do New Zealanders feel about spending another week in lockdown? Checkpoint reporter Nita Blake-Pearson has been speaking with locals in Auckland's Grayland Park.
I think it's the right thing to do, to be honest. We're still finding positive cases every day, so until it's at 0, I think we should probably stay in lockdown, yeah.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think probably another 1 or 2 weeks would be really, really good. I'm quite happy to stay at home in our little bubble, just doing lots of baking and, making, that kind of stuff.
I wouldn't have extended it beyond probably Monday of next week for the fact that I think there's a lot of fatigue getting out there. The media is pushing it back from the stresses in relation to the effects long term for the economy, and I think people's awareness are increasing that this is going to come as a huge cost to the average person.
Well, this is the first I've heard of it, and I actually don't mind at all. I've been pretty happy in my bubble, I've got to say, and I didn't mind if it went on for a bit longer. I know not everybody is happy with it, I'm sure, especially small businesses. But honestly, from a personal level, it doesn't make any odds to me at all. I'm happy with it. Seems quite sensible.
I would have been happy for them to push it out another couple of weeks, to be honest. But I think they've been very clear in the communications all the way through.
And that was our reporter Nita Blake-Pearson talking to people about what they think of the move to go to level 3. It is 18 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The government spokesperson today is Grant Robertson. He's joining us after 5:30. So if you have any questions for him, do text them in on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz and we'll try to put some of those to him when he comes on the program. Businesses being buoyed by government subsidies will welcome the announcement today that some work can begin on getting ready for a transition to level 3 next Tuesday. But what is clear is that retailers who aren't set up to trade online won't be back in the game just yet. Chief Executive of Retail New Zealand, Greg Harford, joins me now. Greg, I imagine that this is, it's a double-edged sword for businesses.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's certainly, I think, good news coming out of the health data. It's not so good news for business that will be continued to be locked down for another week, and online trading won't be allowed then. And then, of course, moving into post-Monday the 27th, there'll be online trading permitted, but that will only cover a fraction of the business that retailers would normally be doing during that period.
Do you know, sorry to interrupt, Greg, but do you know how many of your membership are match fit to go completely online, contactless retail?
Yeah, the majority are. So about 75% of our members have got some sort of e-commerce platform available to them, but there's still a quarter of businesses out there that don't, and they're the ones who are going to struggle the most with the world from Monday the 27th. And I guess a lot of those businesses will be cafes and takeaway bars, things like that. You wouldn't necessarily expect them to have a digital presence, but there's a number of more traditional retailers who perhaps over the next week will need to be thinking about whether they set up an online store.
Yeah, so what are you hearing about the way people are adapting?
Well, retailers are looking pretty hard at innovative ways to meet customer needs. And I think one of the challenges through the last few weeks has been that they've felt unable to do that because online shopping has not been permitted. So businesses are looking at their stocks. They're looking at how to reach out to their customers who perhaps might not be buying from them online, and looking to reconnect with their customers and hopefully generate some business after next week.
Is the wage subsidy keeping a number of these people afloat?
It absolutely is. We've just completed a survey of our members which shows that the wage subsidy has been instrumental at keeping people employed. The worry, though, is that when that wage subsidy runs out, which for many businesses will be about 8 weeks away, if business hasn't picked up substantially, there will be job losses following that point.
Well, given that level 3 is definitely for another 2 weeks and it is a week away, that's 3 weeks, and then the decision will be reconsidered again, do you think that it will push some retailers, to the wire here?
There are definitely some retail businesses that won't be surviving the COVID-19 crisis. Retail's been pretty fragile for a long time, and this will be, very much doom and gloom for some. It will be, and those that do come out of it will, not be in as good a financial position as when they went into it.
Any particular sector within that group?
Look, to be honest, it's pretty much across the board. We're seeing, everyone from fashion retailers to booksellers to even hardware stores expressing real concern to us about the revenues that they're seeing and kind of where they think their position's going to be after the lockdown. So the issues really are right across the retail sector and indeed across the economy.
So obviously, in terms of residential rent, the government put a rent freeze on. It's not able to do that with commercial rent. So is there much compassion being showed to retailers who have high overheads like rent?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest with you, and rent is certainly a big issue for retailers and others renting commercial spaces. Some landlords have certainly come to the party and offered some rent relief through the current situation that we're in, but we're also hearing of other situations where landlords are saying, no, you need to pay your rent and you need to pay it when it's due. So I think that is something we'd like to see the government move on and put some real guidance out there around what's appropriate rent relief and what level of proportionality is appropriate.
I'm just wondering, do you actually agree with this decision that there should be no face-to-face retail at level 3? Do you accept that that is the best for public health?
Well, I think, we've seen over the last month or so really good processes being rolled out in the grocery sector and in pharmacies that allow customers and employees to stay safe and keep stores open. We think that actually it would be best at level 3 for shops to be able to open as long as they can do that safely. It certainly won't be appropriate in every case, but we do think that it's reasonable for safe shopping to be allowed if that's doable.
And what kind of shops do you reckon that would be possible? Obviously not cafes and restaurants.
No, but there could be a range of others. If you think about garden centres, for example, which typically have very large outdoor sites, car yards, again, outdoor sites, big footprint stores, hardware shops, home shops. There's a range of businesses that can manage the flow of customers in and out of stores reasonably well. They can manage social distancing within those stores and effectively are no different really to the footprint that you might see in a supermarket. So it's hard to understand why those businesses are prevented from opening if it's safe to do so.
Do you know what the turnover has been like in the last 4 weeks for your retailers?
Oh, it's been almost minimal.
Could you put a percentage on it?
Look, I don't have a number, but most retailers have not been able to trade at all, and a smaller number have been able to trade only to sell a limited number of goods online. So I think if you sort of exclude grocery from it, retail spending is probably down maybe 10-20% of where it would normally be.
Greg, really appreciate your time this evening. That is Greg Harford, who's the Chief Executive of Retail New Zealand. A man living near the scene of a fatal police shooting in Auckland overnight heard screaming and yelling and the man taunting neighbours to call the police before he was killed. Police say the machete-wielding man smashed windows in the house of a terrified family, as well as damaging cars and power lines. Forensic teams and investigators are at the scene today on the residential Central Avenue in Papatoetoe, cordoned off and quiet after a night of horror. John Bond reports.
Just 50 metres away from where it all happened, Ragube Rehan was woken by loud noises and yelling, cutting through the stillness of the night.
I heard lots of smashing with the windows of the cars, or might be they were the house windows. In the meantime, he was screaming and he was so drunk.
It was about 1 a.m. at that point, and he says the man was becoming abusive to neighbours who'd woken up.
Yeah, he was yelling and screaming, and he's saying, "F off you," and this and that. Whoever wants to complain to the police, who care about the police.
He says when an officer arrived, things quickly escalated.
I heard that they were arguing between each other, and then in the meantime, within 2 minutes, there were 2 shots. Tuk.
The man died at the scene, despite being given medical help straight away. Today, the entire street was cordoned off with various police staff, including detectives and forensics, ducking under the tape throughout the morning. They were focusing on 2 or 3 different locations, all near houses on a single side of the street. Very few residents were stepping outside at all, and around midday a hearse pulled out of the road. The county's Manukau District Commander, Superintendent Jill Rogers, says the police had 13 calls from distressed residents in a matter of minutes.
These calls reported that he had been chopping at power lines, mailboxes, and we received one really distressed call from a family who were within their own home when he smashed windows and tried to enter that address.
Ms. Rogers says the officer first on the scene was a dog handler who tried to speak with the man, but he continued to move towards them with knife in hand.
This is an incident that's unfolded extremely rapidly. I'm talking over in a couple of minutes. He has called upon him to drop the weapon. He hasn't done so and has been shot.
Ms. Rogers confirmed the officer fired 2 shots and that the man was given immediate medical assistance. She was asked if she was confident the officer had done everything they could before shooting.
We support our officers every day to make good decisions. This has been an incredibly dynamic and rapidly unfolding situation, and we have sadly been left with the outcome we have today.
Ms. Rogers says the armed response teams were not involved. The police have launched 2 investigations into the shooting and notified the Independent Police Conduct Authority. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, aho.
Just joining us, New Zealand will remain in lockdown for another week. We will officially move to Alert Level 3 at 11:59 p.m. next Monday night after the Anzac Monday holiday, where we will remain in Level 3 for at least 2 weeks until May 11th. The government spokesperson is Grant Robertson today. He'll join us at 5:30. If you have questions for him, you can text us on 2101 or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. So get those in quick. He'll be with us shortly. It is time now, though, to go to the headlines with Paul Brennan.
Thanks, Lisa. The Prime Minister says moving to Alert Level 3 in just over 1 week's time will make a significant difference to the economy. Jacinda Ardern says 400,000 people are expected to return to work under the relaxed rules. She says the government will review the alert level again after 2 weeks at level 3. An audit of the contact tracing system has found it's too slow and must rapidly expand. The audit by infectious diseases expert Dr. Aisha Verrill makes 8 recommendations on how the Ministry of Health can improve the system. It says some public health units' contact tracing system range from a basic Excel template to purpose-built clinical systems. The Health Ministry says COVID-19 is not spreading widely through the community. There were 9 more cases reported today, making a total of 1,440. But the government says under Level 3, people should stay at home unless they have to leave for essential work and services. However, thousands of businesses will be able to resume trading, schools can reopen for some students, and funerals and weddings of up to 10 people may be allowed. The government is giving another $55 million to improve the system for tracing contacts of people who catch COVID-19, including increasing staff from 220 to 300. An independent audit has found some gaps, and the Health Ministry says it's aiming to boost the number of contacts traced from the current 5,000 per day. The Capital and Coast DHB says none of the 70 other staff who were swabbed after coming in contact with an infected Wellington Hospital nurse have tested positive. The health authorities are now tracing the nurse's community contacts, and the DHB says it's investigating how the infection happened. And a man who lives near the scene of last night's fatal police shooting in Auckland heard a man screaming and swearing before an officer shot him dead. The police say the man, who was wielding a machete, smashed windows in one house and damaged other property. They say he advanced on the police officer with the machete and died at the scene after being shot. And those are the headlines.
Paul, you're with Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time now for business news with Nona Pelsier. Nona, what's going on with inflation? Higher prices have pushed it higher than expected. What are the numbers?
Yeah, look, our annual inflation rose to 2.5%. That's the highest in nearly 9 years. That was from 1.9% the previous quarter. Now, I'm talking about the first 3 months of the year. Interestingly, though, those numbers are really just history, and what we're looking at now is more deflationary pressures than inflationary pressures. So we're going to be looking at how consumer prices fare over up until the end of June through the lockdown period. Some of the things that drove prices higher over in the first quarter were basically rising rents, interestingly, and higher tobacco taxes.
Nona, let's do a quick trot around the markets.
All right, so our own top 50 index, we ended down just slightly, only 16 points. That's 16 to 10,763. Now that compares to the rest of the market. Australia's looking kind of weak. Asia too, very cautious there. Some pretty poor data coming out of Japan in terms of export numbers. So the New Zealand dollar, though, it perked up just a little bit following the government's announcement about the lockdown. We are at 60.5 US cents, 95.2 Australian, and 48.5 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. That's Nona Peltier with our business update. Well, the countdown is on at 11:59 p.m. Monday, April 27th. New Zealand will move to Alert Level 3, 5 days and a holiday weekend longer than first anticipated. But the Prime Minister says our team of 5 million has broken the chain of transmission for COVID-19 and we've stopped a wave of devastation. Businesses have been given the go-ahead to return to their premises this week and get ready to get back to business. We'll stay at Alert Level 3 for 2 weeks before the government reviews the decision. Joining us now to answer your questions is the Minister of Finance, who is speaking for all of government today, Grant Robertson. Good evening, Minister.
Evening, Lisa.
How much of a close call was it between pushing it out 1 week or 2?
Oh, look, we assessed a range of options. We assessed going on and carrying level 4 on for a couple more weeks. We also assessed the option of lifting immediately on this week. And we fell for what we thought was the right balanced decision that gave us the ability to lock in the gains that we've made, which have been, as you were quoting the Prime Minister then, extraordinary, but also allow us to do a little bit more work to make sure we're confident in our systems, also for allowing the education system and businesses to prepare as well. So we think we've come up with the right balanced decision.
I'm just wondering, Jacinda Ardern says that Dr. Bloomfield didn't just agree with the move that you've made today, but recommended it. I'm wondering how he came to such a different conclusion to other independent modellers who said we should really wait 2 weeks, because that 1 week is quite a significant difference in opinion. How did they come to two different conclusions?
Look, just to be absolutely clear, it was Dr. Bloomfield's recommendation to us to do this, so he didn't just go along with the decision. He recommended the decision that Cabinet eventually took. Look, there have been a range of modelling all the way through this situation, and obviously, the modelling that Sean Hendy, who I've got a lot of respect for, has told us some stories. We've had other modelling, including from the likes of Rodney Jones and his team, that tells a slightly different story. So we took all of that into account, obviously also looking at the way that we've bucked the trend in many ways of some of that earlier modelling, because we've kept level 4 at such a tight extent, and that's down to New Zealanders. And so we've got the opportunity now to lock those gains in and do this once and do it right. That is not a luxury a lot of other countries around the world have, and we should capitalise on it.
Well, the point there is some people would argue that you don't want to look back and wonder if you could have done more. So maybe a little bit more sacrifice now would save us in the long run. Aren't you concerned that in a couple of weeks' time, this could cost us?
I think it's important to remember that level 3 is still a very restrictive level. What it is doing is allowing some more economic activity. But as the Prime Minister said this afternoon, in terms of social contact, it's very much the same. We still want people to work from home if that is possible for them, and for children to learn from home if that is possible for them. We still want people to keep their physical distance and limit their activities recreationally to regionally and to low risk. So these are still very, very restrictive conditions which allow us to lock in the gains further that we made in alert level 4. So it's not like we're suddenly moving to some very loose regime. This is still restrictive, appropriately slow, so that we can make sure we break this transmission once and for all.
Have you been polling the public during this time to see how they feel about the situation?
Personally, I haven't, and I haven't been at all focused on that.
No, but the government, have they done any polls during this time to see how people feel about it, how they would have felt about an extension? Were you polling on that?
Look, Lisa, I just can't answer that question. I can tell you this. I don't really need personally to be looking at polls, because I can see what's in my emails, what's in my Facebook, what's coming to us through the mainstream media as well. And I think overall I've seen polls from Colmar Brunton, I think, in the news, and others that indicate that overall New Zealanders are backing the way that the government has gone here by going hard and going early. But our focus is on doing the right thing here for the long-term health of both New Zealanders and of our economy.
But for that, you need people's tolerance and a high level of tolerance. So how worried were you that people's commitment to this might wane if you pushed it out even further?
I think it's just been an extraordinary commitment by New Zealanders. I can remember in the days before we went into level 4, a senior business person saying to me they just didn't think New Zealanders had the temperament to stick with the rules of level 4, and by and large we have, and that's been extraordinary. So I've got trust in New Zealanders that we'll keep doing that. When we get the rules under level 3, it's actually even more important than ever to be disciplined as more people go back to work and have more contact with others. But no, I think New Zealanders have bought into this incredibly well, and they will continue to do as we move through level 3.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions from listeners, so let's see if we can crack through as many as possible. This person is wondering the allowance for businesses to re-enter workplaces this week, in the last week of lockdown. Who does that apply to? Is it employers? Is it staff? And can they use public transport to do it?
The answer to that is it's focused on employers in the first instance. It's not an invitation to start trading. It's an opportunity to prepare. So it might be somebody who needs to come in and open up so stock can be delivered so that they can trade next week. It might be in a manufacturing plant to make sure that someone comes in, cleans it up, does any urgent maintenance, makes sure that the appropriate physical distancing procedures have been put in place. So it's that kind of preparatory work. Yes, public public transport is available to be used in most major cities now for people who need to do that kind of thing. But we're not asking, large numbers of people to do this, merely who is required to be able to have a business ready to trade on Tuesday.
Okay, another person is saying if you're in that group of vulnerable workers or you're over the age of 70 and this woman says she's pregnant, at what level should they be returning to work? She's asking.
Look, anybody who is considered vulnerable or is immunocompromised, we don't want them coming into work, and there is an essential worker leave scheme that gives some good criteria around that. We'll have a bit more to say about how that will apply in level 3 and level 2 over the coming days, but certainly, the same advice applies. If you're sick, stay home, and if you are in that immunocompromised or vulnerable category, we really do want people as much as they possibly can to stay home.
Another person is saying, and there's a few of these, that they are confused about the extension in the bubble. Under level 3, can we spend time with our daughter and 2 grandchildren who do not live with us and who aren't currently part of our bubble?
Yeah, look, we only really want people to extend the bubble a little. It's basically focused around perhaps somebody who has been on their own, who might bring someone else, or they might join with somebody else in an exclusive bubble, or where there's a caregiver involved who needs to come in and support, or perhaps a de facto partner or someone who helps with childcare and so on. So no, it's not an invitation just to extend your bubble out to 2 or 3 people who you're missing at the moment. We're all missing people at the moment. We want this to be a limited extension to just support people to be able to continue to be able to have some social contact, to have the support that they need in their households.
Okay, someone has texted in to say, are Air New Zealand staff who are still flying internationally remain exempt from the quarantine for 14 days?
That is my understanding, Lisa, if that continues to be the case, yes. That exemption was granted at the very, very beginning. It allows our flights to be able to move both people and goods around. Of course, there are very, very few international flights now.
Does that need to be reviewed, though, given the stats around transmission from overseas travel?
Yeah, look, I'll have to have a wee look into that. It's not an issue that's been raised with me for the last few days. As far as I understand, those rules still apply, but I'm happy to check and get back to you.
Full disclosure, this is a follow-up from me. Given you're the stakeholding minister, can you tell us how many cases of COVID-19 have been at Air New Zealand?
Oh, look, I don't have up-to-date statistics on that. There was a handful of them in the early days of New Zealanders returning. I don't want to speculate on the number, Lisa, but it was...
How come you don't have those figures? Are they reporting them to you regularly?
They were in those early days. The fact that I haven't had any updates lately indicates to me that it isn't something that's occurring again, because we are down to so few flights at this stage.
Okay. Are you able to find that number out for us?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Another person is saying, is random testing of essential workers for community transmission under consideration?
Not only under consideration, underway.
Yeah.
So those first community transmission testing that was done, you would have noticed, was in the car park of a supermarket, and that was not an accident. That was because we wanted the opportunity for those essential workers in the supermarket to be able to be tested, between shifts or on their way to shifts, and so that was actually one of the very reasons that happened. Certainly within rest homes and elsewhere, all of that testing has been ramped up.
Someone is asking about international parcels. Will they be delivered now under level 3? And what about post offices?
I don't imagine you'll see a lot of opening of post offices, but I'll have to go back and check on that. I know that that certainly when it comes to parcels and freight coming in, there has been some coming in from offshore, and I'm sure we'll see more. I think one thing to point out here is something that I have been asked about quite a bit, which is the fact that we limited, obviously, online shopping in New Zealand. Obviously, under level 3, that's back, and obviously I'd be encouraging New Zealanders to be ordering their online shopping from New Zealand-based sites as much as possible.
Want to squeeze 2 more in before you have to go. Someone's asking, businesses returning to work on a scaled down level, are they still eligible for the wage subsidy?
Well, they will have already applied in many, many cases, yes. They are, as long as their turnover is down by that 30% that we said before. The really important point about that, though, is if someone is returning to work, they must be paid for the hours that they work. So a lot of businesses have been, who've been in complete lockdown have just been paying the wage subsidy and not much more. People should be paid for the hours that they work.
Okay, let's squeeze this last one in. Assuming we get to the point where COVID is eliminated, what is the government going to do to take advantage of this very unique and powerful competitive advantage that we will have, the viewer asks?
That's one of the issues we've been thinking a lot about in the last little while, is if we can continue the great progress we've made, we are going to be a country that not only gets to trade off that clean green image, but also off the fact that we've done this amazing job here. We will continue to be an exporting nation. It will be some time before we open those borders up, because it's such an important part of having got us to where we've got to. But we're certainly looking to continue to build on our natural advantages, and we will continue to be, out there in the world, making sure everybody understands both what a great job New Zealanders have done and what a great country we are with all the exports that we have to offer.
Can I get a yes or no on this one? Are you going to bump up the wage subsidies in line with some overseas countries?
Look, we set that up as a 12-week upfront lump sum payment, and I'm really pleased about that, because in many of those other overseas jurisdictions people are looking at, no money at all has been paid out yet. So we're very pleased with what we did there, but as you would have noted, we've continued to tweak it, we've continued to build in other support for businesses and for households, and we're still working on future ideas in that regard.
Appreciate your time. That is Finance Minister Grant Robertson, who's also the government spokesperson on COVID-19 today. It is 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. How are you feeling about the shift in levels? You've got a week to go. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A New Zealand media expert says this country should waste no time in following an Australian decision to draw up a mandatory code forcing Facebook and Google to pay for content generated by traditional news media companies. Dr. Gavin Ellis, a former editor of the New Zealand Herald, says the digital giants have got away with stealing news content for too long. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
The Australian Treasurer Josh Frydenberg told the ABC today that the rise of digital platforms had brought into question the viability of traditional media and highlighted the inability of the current regulatory framework to make sure journalistic content is properly compensated for. Mr. Frydenberg says his government had become frustrated by the lack of progress on a voluntary code.
It was an inability of the parties to reach agreement on this key issue of payment for content. In the words of the ACCC, there was no expectation of any progress being made with respect to that key issue which the code was seeking to deal with, and that's why we've gone down this path.
Mr. Frydenberg says the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has now been directed to develop a mandatory code by July.
We're not seeking to protect traditional media businesses from the rigour of competition or the rigours of new technology. What we're seeking to do here is ensure a level playing field and a regulatory framework that is fit for purpose.
He says it's only fair that those who generate content get paid for it. Dr. Gavin Ellis, who made a submission on the plight of New Zealand media to the Epidemic Response Committee last week, couldn't agree more.
Well, I think it's a red letter day, I really do. I think that this is the beginning of an international trend to force social platforms to pay for what they've been stealing for a very long time.
In New Zealand, Google and Facebook account for more than 70% of the annual $1.26 billion spent on online advertising. Dr. Ellis says he hopes New Zealand will follow Australia's lead.
My fervent hope is that New Zealand will adopt an identical approach and perhaps use the same code if it's appropriate, because I think there's safety in an Australia-New Zealand approach rather than us trying to go it alone.
Dr. Ellis says advertising in traditional media had fallen off a cliff in the COVID-19 world, and any code would not be a short-term fix for job losses and budget cuts. Its benefits would come over time.
So long as this regime is an equitable one that does pay real dividends to our news media companies to compensate them, for the product of their endeavours, it will go a long way to helping them, so long as the amount of money involved is something other than a token gesture.
In a statement, New Zealand's Broadcasting, Communications and Digital Media Minister, Chris Farfoy, says getting digital platforms to pay for news created by other media organisations forms part of a wider discussion about challenges facing the industry.
A whole range of options are being considered as the government looks at what can be done to help the media sector, both in the short term to deal with issues exacerbated by COVID-19, and longer term to try to address fundamental problems that have existed well before COVID-19. Commercial relationships between international platforms such as Google and Facebook and the news media in New Zealand are one of a range of factors being discussed.
Mr Farfoy says no specific instructions have been given to the Commerce Commission to investigate whether a similar code to the Australians would be useful here. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
Hawke's Bay Hospital is hoping a complete refiguration into COVID and non-COVID areas will reassure the public that it is a safe place to seek help in a medical emergency. The number of people turning up to the emergency department has fallen dramatically. Doctors are worried people aren't getting the help they need because they fear they might catch the virus. Alarmingly, that includes 2 patients who turned up 3 days after having heart attacks. But as Anusha Bradley reports, the rapid construction of a new facility to triage suspected COVID patients hopes to turn that around as the hospital braces itself for the winter flu season.
The final touches are being put on this new prefab building that from next Tuesday will become a special triage centre for any patients turning up at the emergency department with respiratory symptoms. Emergency consultant Dr Andrew German says this will allow suspected COVID patients to be completely isolated from other patients.
Patients will arrive at the entrance. They'll be screened by a nurse asking for any respiratory illness or contacts. If they have no respiratory illness, they'll go into the main department. If they have any respiratory symptoms, they'll be given a mask and placed in isolation in this facility.
As well as creating a separate area inside the emergency department for suspected COVID patients, new areas have also been set up to treat them if they're admitted.
We've set up an isolation ward, which did mean moving around different areas. So that's able to have over 20 patients all isolated from each other. And then we've also set up increased intensive care capacity. So that's around double what it was prior to this starting.
Dr German hopes this will reassure the public that Hawke's Bay Hospital is a safe place to seek medical help.
We've seen our presentations reduced about 50%. That was from the first week of lockdown. That's crept up now to about 3/4. But it does highlight that people might be staying home with emergencies and not presenting. So we just want to reassure everyone that this is a safe place to present. We do have our procedures in place to keep people safe. And yeah, I personally have looked after 2 patients that presented 3 days after having a heart attack. Which is definitely a worry, and I wouldn't have seen that before COVID-19.
The District Health Board's Capital Projects Manager, Megan Knowles, says the new triage centre was hastily constructed in just 2 weeks after realising a new way was needed to manage suspected COVID patients.
So we looked at our options throughout the region, considered portable buildings, tents, modular buildings. We quickly discounted tents and the like because they're just not suitable over winter. And we looked at what's the thing we can get here the quickest, and that's something that's already built. We've had some amazing contractors put in some awesome hours to get this thing connected in a very, very short time frame.
Only 4 patients with COVID have been hospitalised in Hawke's Bay to date, and half of the 41 positive cases in the region are now recovered. But Dr German says this new way of working will remain in place until the virus is eradicated or a vaccine is found. In Hastings for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Horizon International manufactures paving stones. Think flash commercial courtyards, bespoke paved areas for home and public spaces. A staff of 20, they are not essential services, but they are integral to construction. Its managing director, John Roper, has drafted a plan to return to work safely when we move to level 3, and he joins us now. John, will you be straight out of the starting gate tomorrow? The Prime Minister's given you the thumbs up to start preparing to go back to work.
Yeah, we've done a bit of preparation prior to the announcement today, and we had anticipated the availability to start work next week. So we've put our plans into place, which will take the rest of the week to put in place and make sure that we've got a safe environment for all our guys to kick off next week. Yeah.
So how different are things going to be?
Oh, I think they'll be quite a lot different, really. I mean, you'll have to have new work practices to separate the guys and all the things that have been certainly spoken of until now. I think it'll be a slower start point. I don't think production will be to the level that it would normally be, as everybody will be a bit careful and a bit edgy about what they're doing. But that's to be expected. It'll be a gradual build-up as to when you get into full production.
Paint a picture for me, John. I mean, under normal circumstances, how closely would people be working together, and how are you going to manage all of that stuff?
Yeah, we're fortunate in our process, which is a production line. We normally work at least 2 metres apart from one area where the guys are within about a metre distance. But we have some Filipino workers who we've luckily enough to have working for us, and they live together. So in that close proximity, if we change our process around and put those guys who are within close proximity anyway, it'll certainly but leave them apart. It'll certainly assist us in our processing.
So in essence, you're restricting one part of your production to an already existing bubble. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So will you be able to bring all your workers back, or will some people still be stood down under this level 3 regime?
Yeah, our factory workers will be all back together, but our sales and office staff will be operating from home. We won't be opening our showrooms or our office, and they've been working from home up until now, and it's just really an extension of where we are at present, which seems to be working okay.
Is it a relief to hear the news today?
Yeah, it is really. Not only for us, but for everybody, I guess. We'd like to think that this whole push about Buy New Zealand is also a pretty important aspect, and I think that's something that will gain momentum. And so with the emphasis on that Buy New Zealand plus being able to get back into work, I think that we are conservatively looking forward to the next period of time and the challenges that it'll have for us and everybody else.
So at the end of this, we would have been 5 weeks at level 4. I mean, how much has that hurt from a business point of view?
Yes, substantially. We've probably spent the last virtually every day since the lockdown occurred with trying to manage and model our financial situation, and it's all we've got various models as to how many days and how long and etc. that it would last for, and how I'd manage that position. And it has been a challenge, but we're in a position, I think, that if we are very careful and we manage it properly, we won't be losing any staff, and everybody will retain their jobs and be back on full pay just as soon as we possibly can, which is a fantastic relief when you think of all of the people who are relying on us to provide them their security for their involvement.
So when you say you're hoping to be back on full pay shortly, how have you managed that? I imagine that you applied for wage subsidies?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, for sure. But I guess it's just about managing the relationships that we have with our people who are our the people that we supply, and just working alongside them and making sure that whole money go round is continuing. And by doing that, it will enable us to manage to get through and keep everybody fully engaged.
So are you in a rented premise?
Yes.
Did you seek any relief in terms of the rent that you're paying?
Yes, we did, and we've got a fantastic people who are our landlord, and we've got several locations, and each one is a separate situation. But no, everybody who we have has been really accommodating, and we've really appreciated the assistance that they've given us to enable us to just to protect our cash position and ensure that we're ready to go. Yeah, everybody's been really working together, which is just fantastic.
I mean, how quickly is it going to take you to scale up? Because are there sort of things that you literally had to down tools and walk away from when we were declared to be in a lockdown?
Oh yes, yeah, for sure. We're involved with, as you said, in the construction industry, and as part of that, we've got some infrastructure projects that we are supplying to, and they'll be opening those up at the moment, and we've just got to make sure that we've got all of our raw materials and products available that we can supply them, so that they can continue on and do their part of it, and we don't hold them up with the product that we're manufacturing for them.
You mentioned this idea that, businesses are going to be relying on people to buy New Zealand made. Is that a message you want to hear the government pushing?
Oh, I think so. I mean, it's interesting that like I guess the rest of the world, everybody has got the importation of materials from China, and we also are large importers of materials from China. But we have a large engine of cost structure which is running our factory, and we strongly believe that with a change of emphasis where possible across the board.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. No mai, haere mai. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. The national lockdown has been extended until the end of next Monday, at which point the country will shift to Alert Level 3 for at least a fortnight. The tough restrictions had been set to relax in roughly 48 hours, but Cabinet opted today to push back the endpoint. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The Prime Minister says New Zealanders have successfully broken the chain of transmission, and this country has taken a quantum leap forward in its fight against the virus. But she says there's been too much sacrifice to squander the progress made so far, which is why the Level 4 lockdown has been extended. In the meantime, businesses and schools can start preparing to open in a very limited way. Level 3 will be harder to enforce, but Jacinda Ardern says the government trusts people to take it seriously. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
Ms Ardern says she expects 400,000 people to return to the workforce under the slightly relaxed rules.
Alert Level 3 is still a very restricted place to be, and for many people it won't feel a lot different to where we are now. It does open up, though, more parts of the economy, and that is a significant difference.
The National Party leader Simon Bridges says while New Zealanders have done a great job, the government failed to do the groundwork necessary to lift the lockdown on Thursday.
Regrettably, the government hasn't done the groundwork on their side of the bargain to be ready to move to greater freedom this week.
Simon Bridges says businesses will suffer further damage as a result of this decision. An audit of the COVID-19 contact tracing system has found it's too slow and must rapidly expand. The independent audit by infectious diseases expert Aisha Verrill makes 8 recommendations on how the Ministry of Health can improve the system. It says public health units' tracing capability must increase 3- or 4-fold as long as COVID-19 remains a health threat. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says the Ministry is acting on Dr Verrill's top recommendation, which is to plough more money into the public health units.
She identified that the need to move the system from a local, very manual process to a national and electronic one was what was needed to address what you might call a range of small gaps and areas for improvement.
Ashley Bloomfield. The Prime Minister says another $55 million is being put into tracing and the number of staff will be boosted from 220 to 300. Winston Peters has failed in the legal action he took over the leaking of details about his superannuation overpayment to media before the 2017 election. The Deputy Prime Minister took 2 senior public servants and former National Ministers Anne Tolley and Paula Bennett to court, claiming they'd breached his privacy. In a judgment released today, Justice Venning says Mr Peters' claim failed because he could not establish that any of the defendants were responsible for the leak. He also says officials had a proper purpose in briefing ministers about the overpayment. The Taieri Gorge and Seasider rail excursions out of Dunedin are going into recess and 51 jobs are threatened because of the economic effects of COVID-19. Dunedin Railways Limited is mothballing its track and rolling stock, the cost of which will be met by its owner, the council. Its chair, Kevin Winders, says it's an alternative to closure and he hopes to explore other options in the future. A skeleton staff of 4 has been proposed to prepare the company for hibernation and maintain some assets. Consumer New Zealand is urging people check their own power meters if they're worried about energy companies estimating bills during the lockdown. With so many people working from home and spending most of their spare time there as well, there are concerns power bills could rise. The head of research at Consumer New Zealand, Jessica Wilson, says customers can discuss their concerns with their energy company.
More of us are at home, it's getting colder, so we're cranking up the heater, so that means power use is going up as well. So if you're worried about paying, our advice would be to contact your power company straight away, discuss flexible payment options with it. It's got a responsibility to help you, as well as check you're on the right plan.
Jessica Wilson of Consumer New Zealand. It's nearly 4.5 minutes past 6. To sport now, the former All Blacks coach Sir Steve Hansen is reiterating his call for leading nations to put their own interests aside for the sake of rugby's future. With many international unions bracing for a significant financial hit, Hansen has told Wales Online there is a great opportunity for everyone to come together and do what's right. He says all nations must commit to a different approach to restructuring international rugby. American football players hoping to be picked up in this week's NFL draft will need to adhere to a dress code despite the draft now taking place online. The NFL has told top college prospects what it expects to see when Commissioner Roger Goodell announces the names. Traditionally, he announces each franchise's first pick and is joined on stage by sharply dressed players for a photograph. This year, it will be a virtual handshake, with the NFL issuing a long list of what is not acceptable. And that's the news.
The government's big decision.
We can't right at the moment say we've eliminated the disease, and we're certainly still seeing cases daily.
A big decision for schools and parents.
Because I don't think it's possible at the centre to be able to make decisions that is a one-size-fits-all.
And sports fans left with no choice.
The sports section on TV1 News is pretty much esports, because that's it, right? That's the only game in town right now. Unless you want to talk about table tennis or the Belarusian Premier League.
Choose Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Short forecast now through to midnight tomorrow, Tuesday. Northland scattered rain easing to isolated showers. Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine, high cloud for the rest of today. Areas of low cloud tomorrow morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Waitatapa, fine with high cloud. Waitomo to Wellington, including central high country, cloudy periods. Isolated showers for the rest of today. A fine day tomorrow. Nelson, Buller, Westland, Fiordland and Stewart Island. Scattered showers clearing north of the glaciers this evening. Rain developing in Fiordland tomorrow afternoon and in South Westland tomorrow evening. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine, high cloud, but light rain possible in South Canterbury tomorrow evening. Otago and Southland, apart from Stewart Island, high cloud. A few coastal showers this evening. Scattered rain developing late tomorrow afternoon or evening. At the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. Showers tonight and the odd shower there tomorrow. It's nearly 7 minutes past 6.
And you're with Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Our lockdown has been extended by 5 days. New Zealand's team of 5 million will have to wait until midnight next Monday, April 27th, before we move to Alert Level 3, where we will stay until at least May 11th. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made the announcement just after 4 o'clock today. She says whilst it won't make much of a difference socially, it will be a vital boost for businesses after the Anzac Day holiday, when 400,000 more people are expected to return to work. A big part of the decision to extend the lockdown is our ability to contact trace. New Zealand needs to be able to contact trace up to 1,000 cases of COVID-19 in case of a large outbreak in the next 2 years. That's among the recommendations in a new report into contact tracing by Dr. Isha Verrill, who found as we went into lockdown, public health units were being overwhelmed by less than 100 cases a day. Dr. Verrill joins me now on the phone. Good evening. Can you tell me what weaknesses did your audit uncover in our contact tracing?
So the main one was the scale that we're able to achieve because COVID-19 can cause outbreaks so quickly where the case numbers rise exponentially. The ability to achieve scale. Very good contact tracing occurs in public health units by the experienced professionals there, but they also need to be better supported by good data systems. And until we have that, we can't really have the assurance we need about the timeliness and the completeness of the process.
Okay, so you're saying there needs to be the ability to trace 1,000 cases a day within 5 days, is that right?
The time to trace a contact, they need to be traced within 3 days.
Right. So where are we at currently?
So I think I did the audit a week ago. The capacity had increased since the time we went into lockdown. I'm not sure by exactly how much, and it continues to increase all the time. I don't have an updated figure on the number of cases we can trace at the moment, but I think the scale of the government's announcement is in the right ballpark for achieving this target.
So at the time you did the audit, do you know on average how long it was taking them to trace people connected to a confirmed case?
No, and this audit was done over a day, but I guess, Lisa, the thing is, the trouble is I couldn't be told because that information doesn't reside in a single place in the system. We have 12 public health units. Each of them have a different data or information system for managing contacts. We have a single system for cases, but each of them had a different system for contacts. And the really good system that the Ministry had just developed for running their national hub service, that one hadn't yet been rolled out to the public health units. So we lacked a single system to be able to pull that sort of information out of.
So if we don't know that then, how can we say we've got a gold standard tracing system that allows us to move to level 3?
So at the moment, the way people get that information is by being in regular close contact between the Ministry and public health units of how issues are in the public health units, whether they're managing and whether they feel they're dealing with things in a timely way. And that's acceptable when we're dealing with a usual number of, say, tuberculosis or other communicable disease cases that we normally have. But obviously it's not up for the challenge posed by a large cluster of COVID cases or a small outbreak.
Are you comfortable with going to level 3 with the contact tracing system as it is?
Not as it is, but these improvements, I understand, are being made every day. The government appears to be putting a lot of resource into it, and I'm reassured they've accepted the recommendations in my report. So in that case, yes, I would be.
So they are moving towards it and having accepted your recommendations, but would be the ideal situation in your view to wait for them to implement those recommendations before we drop down a level rather than working to them while at level 3?
So I think that depends on a lot of other factors as well, like what the surveillance is telling you. And you'll see that my report, I say, as a baseline, we have to increase 3 or 4-fold and then also have the surge capacity to go up to 1,000. And given that level 3, at the time I wrote my report, it wasn't clear what level 3 would look like. But level 3 also has quite a few restrictions in it, and the bubble size remains quite small for many people. So I think on that basis, it does seem reasonable to continue the work that they're doing. And they have worked very, very fast to stand up this national service. So I find those things reassuring.
So the Health Minister has put out a press statement saying currently the National Close Contact Service has capacity to make 5,000 calls per day. Is that different to contact tracing 1,000 cases a day, making 5,000 calls?
Yes, it's different. That's right, because each case has multiple contacts. So if at the moment maybe our average bubble size is 5 people. So maybe right now, while we're at level 4, we could deal with 1,000 cases a day. But it's when we step down that we need that step down levels and our bubble size increases, so the number of contacts we all have increase. That's when you need that extra capacity in your system. So I see this system as what assures us that we can go to these lower levels with confidence to go about our business and go back to school and so on.
When we have more movement and before the lockdown happened, for every person with COVID-19, can you say on average how many people you have to trace when there is freer movement, like at, say, level 3 or level 2?
Yeah, so that's, I also don't have that data, but I think it was very difficult. Remember, we passed through those levels very quickly on the way to level 4 on the way up. And one of the issues was there were all these most of the cases were returning New Zealanders from overseas where COVID was more common. Many of them took domestic flights to travel around the country, and so that meant they had a lot of close contacts actually. So that was very challenging. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 20 or more close contacts. And sometimes for an individual case, the public health unit was taking a couple of days with several nurses working on it to trace one case.
So as it stands, the system as it stands, 100% obviously being top notch, how far are we away from that? What percentage are we at with our contact tracing service?
Well, I think the quality is high. It's the scalability that's the issue, and I suspect we're probably, as of a week ago, we're probably at about 30% of where we need to be. We've probably improved since I did my audit.
30% of where we need to be, and that does not worry you substantially?
To be resilient to an outbreak, yes. Yeah.
So you're talking about being prepared for the worst case scenario, in essence?
Not the worst case scenario, because we probably can't contact trace our way out of the situation that New York or London is in. But for an outbreak that can pop up in a week, we're about 30% of the way, or we were about 30% of the way there.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Dr. Isha Verrill, who did the audit on our contact tracing system. It is 15 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Many businesses are disappointed the government has extended the lockdown, saying they can't hang on much longer. The country will exit level 4 at 1 minute to midnight next Monday. The Prime Minister says businesses are allowed to get ready this week, but they can't start trading until Tuesday. Sharon Brett-Kelly reports.
The long wait to get back to work is nearly over for thousands of forestry workers who've been in lockdown twice as long as other sectors. They're relieved they've got a date, but the president of Forest Owners Association, Phil Taylor, says another week's delay adds to the pain.
Financial and emotional. What a lot of people probably don't understand is that the forest industry has been not only on lockdown for the last 30 days, but prior to that was constrained production as a result of the COVID-19 impacts in the Chinese market. So in essence, the forestry sector has largely been on standby for 2 months.
Around 300,000 building and construction workers will be able to pick up their tools again. Bosses say new health and safety rules are expected to reduce productivity. It will also cost companies more to implement the rules and to train staff. Rick Hurd is the chief executive of New Zealand's largest privately owned construction firm, Naylor Love.
We've been preparing for the day to go back for quite a bit of time. We've worked through with Chazans and WorkSafe to establish the protocols by which we'll be working under level 3 when we're back at work. For us to go back prematurely would be an absolute disaster. It's better that we go through the shutdown level 4 once and hopefully not again. So I think it's the right choice.
The head of Master Builders, David Kelly, says they really wanted to get back on the job this week.
Well, we would have ideally liked Thursday. I think it's 2 extra working days. That's not the end of the world. I think what was good was to see that they'd be reviewed after 2 weeks. So that sounds like quite an encouraging way that the government's going about it.
Peter Silcock heads the Civil Contractors Organisation.
We would have preferred to start earlier, but we accept the decision and we can work with that and we'll work with that to get our people back to work as soon as we can, and that will be next week now.
Michelle and Ali Asan own 6 Auckland restaurants, including the 3 Tusker Tapas bars. They've changed their menus, cut their hours and prepared staff to be able to offer takeout food for the first time from next Tuesday.
In a way, it worked out quite well for us because I think we weren't 100% ready and worried as well, to see what the virus is, how fast it's rapidly going to be affect New Zealanders. So it was quite good that we had the 4 weeks breakdown and get everything under control.
Retailers are relieved, saying they can't hang on much longer. Toy World Operations Manager Colin Mella says they'll be able to dispatch a backlog of online orders placed during level 4.
Look, it's been tough, there's no doubt about it. When you have to close the doors for 4 weeks and there's no income, that's tough. And we're not talking about large corporate, we're talking about individual business owners. And as I say, they'll be delighted now that they can contribute again. And, we'll have to do business a little bit different in the coming week.
He says the move to level 3 is a welcome relief for 25 store operators around the country.
The team have got a big job to come back in the coming days to clear the backlog. And we've got, plenty of stock for customers who are looking for the toys that have missed out over the last few weeks. So there's plenty of stock there.
For the operator of the boutique store Clothing by Desiree, watching other clothing retailers keep trading has been tough. The brand's owner, Desiree Turner, says the move to level 3 will make a massive difference.
So even though I had been making coats and merino, layers that you do need for winter, because it's high end, it's not counted as essential, which really frustrated me, because I think it's really sad that basically if you want something cheap and crappy and made in China, you can go get it from the warehouse. But if you want to be warm and actually wear something made of quality, too bad.
She's also looking forward to filling online orders placed during level 4. For Checkpoint, Sharon Brett Kelly.
So what do people think of staying in lockdown for another 5 days? Residents of central Wellington told our reporter Logan Church the news wasn't surprising.
Well, I'm not surprised. I thought it might actually be longer than that, because the figures, there are still new cases, and I guess they're being ultra cautious. So 5 days is not too bad.
I'm not really qualified to say if it's the right decision or not, but I guess it's kind of what a lot of people were expecting. So it seems pretty in line with my expectations, I guess. I'd rather caution than not caution, so yeah, it seems pretty reasonable to me.
I think if it's something that we have to do, we should do. I mean, we need to, like I said before, we need to look after ourselves, so if it's the right thing to do, we need to do it. So obviously it's a struggle, but if we need to come out of this, in a good position. So I was looking forward to getting back to work this week, but, another few days at home with the family. That's always nice. Wouldn't mind a backyard though.
I think it's the right call. It's a very balanced and a bit of a compromise, but I think it sort of keeps both sides of the argument happy, and it means that we can prepare for where we want to be, and at the same time listen to very good health advice that we should be relying our decisions on. So I think it's makes sense, and I think most people would be prepared to sacrifice another few days.
Meanwhile, the opposition leader, Simon Bridges, says the government's decision to extend lockdown shows it hasn't done the groundwork required to have the country ready. Posting on his Facebook page a short time ago, he said New Zealand is being held back because the government has not used this time to ensure best practice of testing and tracing, and the availability of PPE hasn't been at the standard it should have been.
Lockdown comes with very significant issues, and the longer it goes, those issues are very real in terms of businesses that accumulate debt from rent and the like and can't pay them, from people who see their livelihoods disappearing, and will have greater incidence of mental health problems and other significant issues. And so I say, actually, look at Australia. It's a model where they've chewed gum and walked at the same time. They've had great health outcomes to date. They can now talk about elimination, and actually they've allowed people to keep their livelihoods.
Mr Bridges said he's sure many Kiwis feel frustration that we still can't do many things Australians have done through the entire lockdown period at great cost in terms of jobs and livelihoods with similar health outcomes. He said he's now worried the harm of staying in lockdown will be greater than if we were to come out. He says we will no doubt see a rise in mental health problems and stress-related illnesses. As some of Sydney's beaches begin to reopen, Australians are hoping a turning point has been reached in the fight against COVID-19. In the past 24 hours, the number of positive cases across the country has dropped dramatically. In Queensland, for the first time in 81 days, there were no new infections in a state with a population of more than 5 million people. Here's the ABC's Felicity Ogilvie.
It couldn't have come any sooner. For weeks now, Sydney residents have had to live without visiting their beloved beaches. But today that's changed. People are now allowed back to many of the city's beaches, including Coogee, where Tony Burrows runs the Bike Cafe.
Because the funny thing was that on the weekend, the only thing on the beach was seagulls. It's like the seagulls are sort of taking over the beach. And now the people have reclaimed the beach.
It's not a complete free-for-all, but it's still a welcome move.
Seem to be following the rules, especially in the beach now. Since it's opened up today. Yeah, there's kids riding bikes. There's people on skateboards on the promenade. We've had a lot of police around here who will actually ask you to move on if you stand in one spot for too long.
And as some Sydney councils ease their rules up, however slightly, could sentiment be shifting across the country? Down in Tasmania, where national parks and many reserves have been closed, local surfer and Senator Peter Wish-Wilson has noticed a bigger crowd at his local break. That's because it's one of the few beaches in his local area that's still open.
In the sense of closing these reserves and beaches for health aspects of the pandemic, it's, in my opinion, it's been counterproductive. It's channeled people into larger numbers of people into small areas.
The keen surfer says he has seen beaches remain open around the country and people maintain social distance even in busy breaks in places such as Queensland, Victoria and WA. Many parents in the Northern Territory and Queensland might be also breathing a sigh of relief today, with schools opening there. But despite infection rates heading down, authorities are holding firm on restrictions. In Victoria, the Premier Daniel Andrews told Channel 9 he isn't budging on social distancing measures.
No one is enjoying not being able to do the things that they love. The alternative, of course, is what we see out of New York and so many European cities. So my message today is stay home, protect the health system and save lives now more than ever. Let's not give back all the great progress that we've made.
To Europe now, and in Spain, the government says it will soon relax its lockdown rules so children can go outside. Other countries are also considering ways to ease social restrictions that have become the norm in the past few months. The BBC's Reged Ahmed reports.
Nurses at La Paz Hospital in Madrid, paying tribute to their chief of surgery, who died from COVID-19 after being infected at his own hospital. As heavily protected intensive care nurses give a thumbs up, it's a stark reminder of the sacrifices made and the toll the coronavirus has taken on European health systems. It's also why the decisions around how to reduce lockdown measures are so important and difficult. Although Spain believes it's over the peak of infections, the Prime Minister is seeking to extend the country's lockdown for now, with an exception.
From the 27th of April, the Spanish government will take measures to alleviate the lockdown, if I can call it that, of our children, so they can go out and benefit from those statistical improvements that we are seeing in the evolution of this pandemic.
France, too, says it's seeing a slow improvement in the number of serious cases, although the health crisis remains. Even so, the French president has already set a May date for the end of lockdown. Italy, though, is still considering its next move, entering its 7th week of strict measures with the highest death toll in Europe. The country is seeing fines for illegal outdoor activity increasing as people are wooed by the warmer weather. For some, though, the journey through this pandemic may be just beginning. Russia has registered another sharp rise in infections. Officials say it's due to an increase in testing. President Putin said the situation was in hand.
All levels of government are working methodically, smoothly and responsibly. The situation is under complete control.
Perhaps a sign of Germany's improved situation as it prepares tentative steps out of lockdown. The country took some unaccompanied migrants from Greece. Overall virus cases in Greece remain relatively low, but some mainland refugee camps have had to be quarantined. And Pope Francis too showed a small sign of emerging from lockdown himself, delivering Mass at an empty church away from the Vatican for the first time in more than a month. His message was that selfish indifference was worse than the virus, warning that the recovery from COVID-19 should not leave anyone behind. Words many may consider as Europe ponders its next steps.
And that's the BB's Regard Ahmed reporting there. Just some feedback before we head off tonight on Simon Bridges' post on his Facebook page. This person says the signs of Simon Bridges beginning to stir up discontent by publicly mocking and attacking the government is sickening. The Director General of Health has been absolutely clear. The great majority of us agree the importance of one more week to help beat this. We are not out of the woods yet. 9 new cases again today. Another person, Libby, commenting on that as well. Simon Bridges' comments about the government's response to COVID-19 is totally out of step. My request, keep Simon in permanent lockdown. Another one in the same vein, and we're having lots of these. Evening, Simon Bridges may be a leader, but intelligence, rationality and reason is not one of his skills. We can be thankful he is not Prime Minister. Stephanie's also been in touch saying, how can you allow Simon Bridges to make somewhat disingenuous statements like Oz and New Zealand have similar outcomes? They are not alike or similar. 12 deaths compared to 67. Which would you prefer? Nairi's been in touch questioning the 5 extra days of lockdown, saying it's actually 7. Nairi, it wasn't supposed to come off until Wednesday at 11:59, so it is by the old reckoning 5 extra days. We will catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister expects 400,000 people, including those in construction, manufacturing and forestry, to go back to work under Alert Level 3. Business owners can now prepare for reopening on April the 28th, and schools for those who need to attend can open for teachers only next Tuesday. An audit of the COVID-19 contact tracing system says it needs a rapid boost of up to 4 times its current capacity. And Winston Peters has lost his defamation claim over the leaking of details about his superannuation overpayment before the 27 election. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Midday Report, Te Purongo o Te Pautūtanga, bringing you the latest news every weekday lunchtime. Live interviews with those making headlines, experts and RNZ reporters covering the big stories of the day. A daily dose of business, sport, rural, world and breaking news, all wrapped up in 1 hour. Tahuri.